Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Legendarium podcast. I am Craig, your host, and with me today is a special guest, Christopher Rowe. Christopher, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Craig?
Very good, very good. And you and I are going to be talking, well, we're going to be talking animals. Okay, that's a weird sentence, but I'll explain it in just a moment. Before we get to our subject, I do want to remind everybody listening to go check out thelegendarium.com, where you can see past episodes grouped by author, grouped by subject. You can also get the calendar with future episodes and links to both Patreon to support the show and Discord to join in the conversation. So thelegendarium.com is where you can find all those things. Now, let's get to Christopher. You are you've been writing for a while and pretty darn successfully. You've been a finalist. I'm seeing here for Hugo, Nebula, World Fantasy Awards, the Theodore Sturgeon. I think I missed one in there somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, you've been writing for a while and doing well at it. How did you get started in writing? Let's kind of get to know you a little bit, and then we'll talk about your latest project, the book that just came out.
Sure. I was always a reader of science fiction and fantasy from a very young age. But then when I was 13 or 14, I'm from Kentucky. I became fascinated with regional literature, Southern literature. And I kind of oscillated back and forth between, pure quill genre fiction. Is science is Asimov on one side and is Tolkien on the other side as you can get. And then, Faulkner and Eudora Welty and Carson McCullers and et cetera on the other side. And it actually kind of like slowed my development as a writer. I was not a writer of fiction until my mid-20s. And I discovered a book. I was working in a bookstore, and a book came out by a Kentucky writer, an Owensboro native named Terry Bisson, who is a World Fantasy Award-winning writer and won every award in the world. And fantastic gentleman. I'm proud to call him a friend and a mentor and a teacher. And his collection of short stories that wowed the world is called Bears Discover Fire. So there's an animal connection here at the very beginning. I opened up the book. It had a very striking cover of bears standing holding torches. The book was called Bears Discover Fire. I opened to the first story, which was called Bears Discover Fire. It's about bears discovering fire.
This is all very confusing. You need to slow down.
Okay, sorry. It's actually not about that. It's about, there are bears who discover fire in the story, but it's about elder care. It's a regionalist story. It's about end-of-life issues. It's about family. And it is set largely in the median of U.S. Interstate 65 between Smiths Grove and Bowling Green, Kentucky, about 50 miles from where I grew up. And it opened my eyes. That story and the other stories in that collection opened my eyes to the fact that I did not have to choose. I did not have to choose between being someone who writes regional Southern fiction and science fiction and fantasy. That there's a not a path between those, but kind of an amalgamated path of those two worlds, or those many worlds. Actually, there are many Souths and there are many science fictions and many fantasies. And, it just like Paul, the scales fell from my eyes, and,
nice.
And I started writing.
I love hearing about somebody working in a bookstore and then becoming a writer. It's a bit like, Tarantino.
The video store,
working in a video store and then becoming a world famous director. Mm-hmm. That's fabulous. So I'm torn on where to go because you've given me a few things. We could talk regional fiction, which I kind of want to do, but let's save it because I teased talking animals at the beginning, and I need to deliver. Okay, I'm nothing if not a slave to the fans. So I wanted to talk about this because your latest book that just came out is called The Navigating Fox, and it's let's see, the quote on the cover is "half fable, half caper, and a pure joy to read." And so you seemed like a good person to talk about this subject with, and we're doing this in part because we just finished reading a few Redwall books on the podcast and discussing those, and and it's a lot of fun to dip into my childhood again, right? But I find it to be an interesting question. Why do we tell fables? Why do we have animals talking? Why don't we just put it in, humans' mouths? And of course, the kind of facile answer here would be, well, it's just why do we have aliens in science fiction? Why do we have elves in fantasy? They're all stand-ins for human. And that's fine. But maybe we can dig a little deeper. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your draw toward a fable style and what you like about talking animals, what it does for you as a writer and as a reader for that matter?
I'm glad you framed the question that way, Craig. I thought you were heading towards why do we as a species gravitate towards, or as writers in general, want to write about talking animals. And I was thinking, Ace didn't have to answer that question. I don't know why I should. And I don't know whether Brian Jakes did ever or not, actually. And I will tell you up front, I have not read those books. I did buy the first one after my publicity team started hollering about Brian Jakes for adults. It is Jakes, right? Is that how you say his last name?
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, I think that's true.
Anyway, why do I?
You and I are both French speakers, and so when I hear Jakes, when I look at it and I hear Jakes, it hurts a little bit inside.
Yeah,
so.
But British man, what are you going to do?
I know it's a.
So this book is a companion piece to an earlier short story titled "Knowledgeable Creatures" that was published, 4 or 5 years ago on the Tor.com website. It was acquired and edited by the legendary editor Ellen Datlow, who also acquired and edited this book. I was writing that story. My intention was to write a noir detective story. And so I started writing a noir detective story. I knew that there would probably be a fantastic element. I didn't know what it would be. And I'm writing along the first page. There's a noir detective. He's at his office, which is actually just a bar. And he's hanging out. And the femme fatale walks in. And he says some noir detective stuff. And she says some femme fatale stuff. And at the bottom of the first page, he introduces himself. And he says, I am the private investigator Connolly Marsh. I am an investigative dog. And I'm like, it's a talking dog.
Nice.
I'll be. And then somehow ancient Rome got in there, and
are we doing the meme? How much do we?
I preceded the meme by years. I preceded the meme. Well, I mean, I'm not.
I was thinking about Rome before it was cool.
Exactly. I'm not older than Edward Gibbon, but I'm getting up there. But no, I'm not. I'm not the first nor the most recent person to be fascinated by ancient Rome.
Sorry, I derailed you.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. So I rapidly started just writing about a bunch of different talking animals, and I've always been fascinated with animals. I've always been fascinated particularly with crows. My name is Christopher Rowe, C. Rowe, crow. I've got a crow tattoo on my arm.
Nice.
And so there's a talking crow in actually both of the pieces so far. In Navigating in Knowledgeable Creatures, it's a very cool. His name is literally Cool Charles. He's a crow. And then in Navigating Fox, there's a kind of a bad character crow named Mal Avis because nothing is not clever. And it's not her real name. It is quite specific that it is a nom de evil or whatever. And so you kind of outline this. I think people are fascinated with talking animals. I'm fascinated with talking animals because animals have recognizable characteristics that are inhuman. So you can tweak that dial a little bit. Yes, aliens, the human imagination is capable of extraordinary things, but it is not capable of not being human. And so to imagine the other as thoroughly and possibly as we can, we will never escape the fact that there is some element of human psychology in what we have imagined. But an opportunity exists for fantasists, for science fiction writers, for religious teachers, for tale tellers, for instructors of every stripe to inhabit or portray or otherwise invest in a story a character traits that we understand to be animalistic. Now, that is immediately anthropomorphic. Now, I reject, and I'm one of like many people these days who reject the idea that anthropomorphism is a bad thing, right? Anthropomorphism may very well save species, right? I mean, I am glad that baby baboons are so dang cute, because that will help save baboons, right? And I think that's it. I think that it's a lens. It's a focusing mechanism
Yeah.
to look at people, and you've got this whole set of not necessarily fully understandable either characteristics of animals, but you can think, okay, a fox is sly. Well, I know what sly means. Now, is a fox sly? Is it fair to say a fox, a real life fox out in the woods, is sly? Probably not. Um, any more or any less than it is to say that guy walking down the street down there looks kind of sly to me. Um, I mean, anytime you describe another psychology, another person, someone outside yourself, you're making assumptions. And if you are a storyteller like I am, then you get to use those assumptions as literal characteristics, as I might say to a classroom.
Yeah, it's as you were talking, I was thinking of if we want to do the simplest possible version of
It's a good
oh
one,
my
isn't it?
gosh, anthropomorphization
Yeah,
and noism.
I'm really hoping we don't get to Southern literature, so I don't have to say Yatnetapa, whatever Faulkner County is. Yeah. All right.
Anyway, no, but I was thinking about dogs and cats. Okay,
Yes.
we're keeping it simple, dogs and cats, because the cliches about dogs and cats are abundant
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much deserved, right? Dogs are happy and they want to jump on you and
Mm-hmm.
they want to play, and
Mm-hmm.
cats are they're aloof and they're quiet and they clean themselves and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So we have uh, these characteristics in mind when we think of a dog, just any old dog or
Mm-hmm.
any cat. But you can also do that, like you said, with other animals, foxes and bears, cows, and sheep. I mean, yeah, we have sayings around the sheep,
Mm-hmm.
all
And
that stuff.
cows, yeah.
And, yeah, all that. So it strikes me that the talking animals idea, the fable, is kind of a shortcut, or it could be used as a
Mm-hmm.
shortcut for human characteristics that the author wants to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And you can so you take the sly fox. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you want to depict someone who's cunning and maybe a little bit manipulative or sneaky or something like that, and so you turn him into a fox in your story, and the reader
Mm-hmm.
presumably is going to pick up on that really quickly, and you don't have to do as much explaining. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's a simple shortcut that way, letting us strip away the complexity that is a fully fledged human being
Mm-hmm.
into and just focus in on one or two characteristics to explore through animals. I don't know. Is that fair?
It is, and I'm going to go a little farther because
Yeah.
every person that is watching or listening to this who has been a pet owner, a traditional Western world pet owner of dogs or cats, knows exactly what you're talking about when you list those characteristics. Every person who has spent a lot of time around dogs and cats, every person who has had the opportunity and the blessing to know or live with, own, whatever, a lot of dogs and cats knows that there are many, many exceptions and outright
Personalities.
outright reversals of those
Mm,
stereotypes. Right? I have had
yeah.
cats who like to fetch.
Right.
I have had dogs who were aloof. Those little yappy dogs that ride around in people's purses, or they're not necessarily gold. They don't have that big goofy golden retriever thing going. Um, so I was sitting here thinking about that, what you were just saying, which you quite rightfully just basically took what I said and kind of like made it more fancy and complete. But I'm sitting here thinking, did anybody did Aesop want to tell a story about a sly creature and he was sitting there thinking, and so he saw a fox trot by, and he said, "Okay, it'll be a fox." Was Aesop the first person to think? Did he make it up? And then everybody that came after him ascribes these characteristics that he invented to that animal. Almost certainly not. Almost certainly not. Right? Are coyotes tricksters? The literal animals that live
Not the Looney Tunes version.
in the southwestern North American continent? I do not know. I have very little experience with coyotes, but presumably the holy teachers and cultural workers who are creating these cycles of stories, millennia and millennia ago, collectively decided or realized or whatever that the coyote, which eventually became an extraordinarily powerful mythic figure and culture hero, and I hesitate to say God because that wouldn't be good anthropology. Not that I'm an anthropologist, but yeah. So coyote becomes coyote, and there's this reflection thing that goes on, right? You and I and Lewis Hyde know that that coyote, as we, especially as we white people understand him, is this kind of like, wacky guy with a giant phallus here and like running around and making Raven mad and turning into a different gender and, having his own babies and all this kind of stuff. And we're like, whoa, it's wild and everything. I didn't know coyotes were like that. Well, coyotes aren't, probably. I said earlier I don't know a lot about coyotes. I'm pretty sure that they don't get into epic sky scanning battles with ravens. But,
Not while we were around anyway.
No, fair. Don't want to ascribe any truth that I haven't witnessed, right? Anyway, to wind it all down and try to answer your question in a pithy way, which is not my way, the answer is yes. The answer is that is why we do it. We do it as an opportunity to learn more about, all fiction. We're learning more about ourselves, start connecting with others. So, yeah.
Let's personalize it then a little bit and go back to what we were saying earlier. Why do you do this? What do you use talking animals for? Why go that route instead of just people in your stories? Let's talk the navigating fox. And,
okay. It's more interesting to me. It's kind of a banal answer, but that is the truth. Yeah, but that is a true answer. Part of my project with this one in particular was to kind of get at some stuff about imperialism and pre-contact cultures and wildness. And when I think of North America, either right now or either tomorrow or either in 1492 or in 1000 or in 3000 BC, before the Common Era, I think of wildness, I think of wilderness, I think of animals, right? I mean, if somebody asked me to conjure up in my head an image of the Great Plains from near the Arctic Circle to near Texas, this vast swath of grasslands spanning the continent, what's the image? Well, the image is bison. All right, that is the first thing I think of, and it is frequently that route. It is frequently that way. When I think of the Pacific Northwest, I think of bald eagles. As I intimated earlier, when I think of the Southwest, I think of coyotes. It's anywhere. I mean, the Maritime Provinces, cod. There's an association that is very strong for me, and I believe for others, between place and history and time and color and experience that involves animals. And I think since I was trying to tell a story that dealt with all those as themes instead of simple characteristics, the time, the place, and so on, then that was a way to access it for for me that has some spark to it, has some vitality, some potency to it. As a writer, it seems to be resonating with readers too. So there we go.
So that's interesting. It actually does tie in very neatly with the idea of regional fiction.
You're going to make me say Yaknatawap. You're going to try to make me say it, are you?
I'm not. I'm not. You did that yourself.
Okay.
I remain blameless. No, it's I hadn't considered that angle before, so I like that quite a bit. As I was thinking of, shortcuts to human characteristics, and that's valid.
Fair, absolutely fair.
But as a shortcut to a region, yeah, it's if you think about, for me, I grew up in Seattle, as a lot of listeners know. So when you say the Northwest, you said bald eagles, but when you said the Northwest, my brain went orcas. Orcas. So that would be a shortcut for me. Oh man, this is fascinating. So tell us a little more. Let's dig into the Navigating Fox a little bit. Why don't you give people a quick elevator pitch of what the story actually is, and then maybe we can dig in a little bit more.
All right. For the purposes of this book, let's go with funicular pitch instead of elevator pitch. There's a funicular in the first 3 pages of the story. That was one of the reasons I wanted to write this, because I don't think there are enough funiculars in contemporary American fiction, and that seemed an opportunity to correct that oversight to some degree. The Navigating Fox is a story about a navigating fox. You sense a running theme here. It is set.
Are there any bears discovering fire?
There are not yet. There might be an homage. I once wrote a story called Bears Discover Mars, which was kind of a mashup of Terry Bisson and Stan Robinson, which, thank God, never saw the light of day. Okay. It's a brief novella, briefish. It's like 28,000 words, 160 pages, I think, in the trade paperback. And it is about a alternate America that is alternate in several crucial ways. It is set roughly, well, it's not roughly, it's set in September 1871 in our dating. And I know that because I figured out exactly what the Roman date would be for the day the story starts. And I even put it in the book. For anybody who is obsessed enough with Roman dating systems to actually be able to find it down. And also spent a day and a half figuring out what that date would be, because the Romans were crazy calendar people. They did not make a lot of sense. They had February, and then they stuck another month in there, and then they went back to February. All right. I knew I wanted that level roughly of technology. I won't say social advancement, because that's a trap and not true. I wanted elements of imperialism. So, Roman Empire never fell. The empire never ended. Thank you, Philip K. Dick. And I wanted a North America, or I wanted an Americas, in which, indigenous peoples had significant political and personal and economic, and since it's a fantasy novel, even magical power, at least equal to, and in the context of where they are, superior to the imperial invaders, basically. And of course, Rome's version of imperialism and version of what is the word I'm looking for? Not imperialism.
Like colonialism?
Rome's version of colonialism, it was vastly different. It wasn't good, it wasn't nice or cool, but it was different than what we think of now when we think of colonialism. They made these kind of like, it wasn't token at first, but they did something different. They did a lot more integration work than say King Leopold III did. Oh my God. Anybody did. I did this morning more than Leopold ever did. So I wanted that kind of aspect in there. I knew it was going to be another knowledgeable creature story, because it's specifically what I was, I don't even remember. I wasn't asked to do a knowledgeable creatures novella, but when the opportunity develops to do a couple of these novellas for Tor.com, it became obvious and clear that that was a story they really liked, and so that would be a good idea to do a knowledgeable creatures thing. I was thinking about all of these things anyway, and the story developed about a navigating fox. His name is Quintus Schuall. The story is about identity and the mysteries of one's past. Shual is the Hebrew word for fox, and that is a clue. It is a clue that does not pay off in the story. I will tell you that right now. But it is.
How dare you?
Yeah, but it is a clue for something that I know that you do not, and that you will not learn when you read this book. And so Quintus is a red fox. He is also a navigator. He is a guide of expeditions, primarily of what we would call Westerners, into the continent. And he leads political and economic, and in this case, religious expeditions. There's not a lot I can say about the purpose of the journeys themselves that are in the book without
giving it away.
Right, yeah, without giving away the plot. But there are, people like the characters. There's a couple of Roman grandees. There's a kind of a sinister priest. There's and his sidekick, the aforementioned Malleus, a crow woman. I mean, bird crow, not the nation crow.
Right.
Everybody likes the raccoon twin cartographers, Loci and Foci, and the bison woman ambassador walks along woman. Hijinks ensue.
Yeah, and it's a redemption story, as I understand it. Right? He's screwed up an expedition and now has to make amends or redeem himself or in some way.
That is the setup is given on the back of the book. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I've got to go on so far. My copy is actually probably somewhere between the Amazon warehouse and my house right now. So,
right.
So we'll get there eventually. But anyway, I just wanted to give people an idea of it. So this is not a book in which all the characters are animals.
No.
These
are
you've got one among the humans.
Yes,
right?
A science fiction. Humans are the dominant political power on the planet, and because knowledgeable creatures do not exist without the intervention of humans. It is an alchemical version of what a science fiction fan might call uplifting. Where a human intervenes in some way in the works of, probably most famously David Brin. It's a combination of technologies that would never work, and I use magic that would never work. So, I'm in good company, I guess. For example, all the animals, all the knowledgeable creatures, I call these uplifted animals, all the creatures that are knowledgeable as opposed to voiceless, which are the animals as we know and understand them in our world, all the knowledgeable creatures can speak. They can speak and be understood, and they are mutually intelligible with humans. There is no animal that we know of that has the physiological apparatus to perfectly reproduce human speech. All right? With its full complexity, with all of the utterances, et cetera, et cetera. And so I completely hand-wave that. I do not, there's not some kind of weird vocal box thing going on with Quintus and the raccoons and with everybody else. They just talk, and people can understand them, and they can understand people, and that's the whole thing.
And and that's the dream, isn't it? That's one aspect of talking animal stories that we haven't really talked about is just the joy that people can have imagining being able to talk to a fox in this case, or your dog or cat or the lion chasing you down. It'd be great if we could just hash this out over tea, right? So I just love, frankly, that's one of the reasons I like the Brian Jakes books is it's really fun to imagine mice talking, and, rats threatening, and whatever else happens. I often although not lately. I haven't talked about this as much lately, but I often talk about how at the beginning and the end of the day, a story should be fun. And with talking animals, you get some fun. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. A
No, I'm,
story,
I'm 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 actually coming up with a definition of fun that like maps onto what you're saying because I think you're right.
I'm
I
thinking
think
of
you're
like
right.
horror movies are fun, even though they're not fun.
Yeah,
Quote
yeah.
unquote, they're entertaining. They're
Yes,
whatever.
well, especially for not for me. I find horror to be very frightening, and
I hate to break it to you, Christopher, but
and
that's the
it's
idea.
actually it scares me. All right, horror
Yeah,
does in fact scare me,
yeah.
and actually I was visiting some friends last night, and they have a whole network. They have a whole streaming service. It's nothing but horror stuff. I don't remember what it was called, but
Shudder.
there you go. That's what it
Yeah,
was. And I was
I
like,
know it.
I'll watch this one thing you're making me watch, and then I'm going to make you watch an episode of Riverdale, and then we're all going to bed.
You know how to party. That's
Exactly.
right. I love it. All right, excellent. So the book is The Navigating Fox. And like you said, it's not a huge novel. It's not a doorstopper. So if somebody's looking for a quicker read, oh, there you go. Yeah, hold it up so I can see. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's got like one of the best covers that I could.
I actually like it quite a lot.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So I'll link to that below. Let's see. Are there any other unexplored avenues that we can go down for the next few minutes when it comes to talking animals? Do you have a favorite talking animal book or other kind of story? Any movies or whatever? Do you have a favorite that you like to think of?
I have
When you
not
think talking
read.
animals?
I have not. You said the threatening rat. That made me think of the Secret of Nim. And
Oh,
I
sure.
do not know. Oh, I'm blanking on who wrote the book. Is Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, or something like that.
Yeah.
I do not remember who wrote it off the top of my head.
Robert O'Brien.
Robert O'Brien. Okay, I have not read the book. The movie is fabulous. And of course, yes, the answer is Bugs Bunny. All right, the answer to this is all for me is always going to be Bugs Bunny. Himself a trickster figure, right? But the whole panoply of American commercial cartoons as it existed from the 30s through around 1960, I guess, maybe a little bit into it. I don't know that much about the history of it, but your Mickey Mouses and your Roadrunners and all that kind of stuff. Your Coyote, who Wile E. Coyote, super genius. But yeah, Bugs and his pals are probably for me were the formative experience for me as far as talking animal texts goes.
And how could it not be? I mean,
Yeah.
it's if you're a person of a certain age who grew up in America, you're very familiar with certain talking animals. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, for me it was. I definitely watched those cartoons as a kid. I was a weirdo. I listened to more radio than I watched TV at a certain age, and so I don't know that I saw all those cartoons, but Redwall was a big one for me. And then once I got old enough, I read Animal Farm. That was a big one for me.
Fun.
Yeah, right. It's like I said, we're stretching the definition of fun with some of these stories, but that's it still works. I'm sticking to my guns here. We'll call them fun guns. Okay, cool. So, oh gosh, I apologize. I'm actually going to pause for a second. My phone is yelling at me. Okay, no. Unpause. People should go check out The Navigating Fox. Christopher, any other parting words of wisdom for those about to embark on your stories?
Well, as you mentioned, you have actually not read the book, but you've asked a lot of cogent and intelligent questions about it. So I would like to encourage people that even if they do not read the book, it's okay to give a 5-star review. Or at least a rating or ranking on any service any service of their choice. Actually, I just hope you read it. It is currently my favorite thing that I've ever written that has been published. It's
that's quite a statement.
Yeah, it's got a it's got a energy to it that I believe people are picking up on. It's been better reviewed. I mean, I've always been really lucky with reviews, but this is quite unusual in terms of how much attention it's getting from even. I was going to say non-genre. I've actually been really lucky even with what we call the trades, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, Kirkus, all that kind of business. But this time I'm getting starred reviews instead of good reviews, and got reviewed in the Wall Street Journal of all places with a fine review, which is kind of interesting. Getting a lot more attention online. It's the first time I've ever done podcast interviews for one of my books, for example.
Yeah.
First time I've ever been on Legendarium.
Oh, well, it's a mark today for sure.
Cheers. I'll raise my Diet Coke to you, sir. I don't know. I legit hope you read it. At least give a look at it, because I think it does. It speaks to a lot of things that I think people are talking about right now and worrying about right now in ways that that are simultaneously accessible, meant to be simultaneously accessible and entertaining and fun. You know.
There you go. That's how you wrap it up. Absolutely. So the Navigating Fox, go check it out. You can't miss it. If you see it on the shelf or something, you won't miss it. Like you said, the cover is amazing. It kind of looks like I almost expect Neil Gaiman to be on the cover with that kind of illustration. I really like it quite a bit. But it's not Neil Gaiman, it's Christopher Rowe. So, Christopher, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me, talking animals. An absolute pleasure, and I hope you'll come back at some point.
This has been great. I hope to as well.